The planet, known as Zera 9, was once a beautiful world full of life. Green forests, blue oceans, and tall mountains stretched across its surface. But now it was a battlefield. The sky was dark, covered with thick smoke, and the ground was scarred by deep craters. The air was filled with the sound of explosions and the cries of soldiers. This was not a place of peace anymore. It was a war zone. The Allied forces, a group of different alien races, had been fighting on Zera 9 for many weeks. They had come together to stop a powerful enemy, the Drakons. The Drakons were a fierce and ruthless race, known for their deadly weapons and brutal tactics. They attacked without mercy, and they had one goal: to conquer Zera 9 and make it their own. The Allies had fought bravely, but things were not going well. Every plan they tried failed. Every time they tried to push the Drakons back, they were overpowered. The Drakons were stronger, and their ships were faster. They had advanced technology that the Allies could not match. The Allies were running out of options, and they knew it. Inside the main base of the Allies, the mood was tense. General Zarin, the leader of the Allied forces, stood in the command room, looking at the large screen in front of him. It showed a map of Zera 9, and most of the map was red, marking the areas that the Drakons had taken over. Only a few small spots were still blue, showing the areas that the Allies controlled. And those spots were shrinking every day. General Zarin was a tall, strong alien with green skin and 4 eyes. He had led many battles before, but this one was different. He could feel it. The Drakons were unlike any enemy he had faced. They did not get tired, and they did not give up. They kept attacking, day and night, without rest. And now, they were getting closer to the last stronghold of the Allies, the big fortress called Ironclad. Ironclad was the last line of defense. If the Drakons took it, the war would be over, and Zera 9 would fall into enemy hands. General Zarin knew that they had to hold Ironclad, no matter what. But as he looked at the map, he felt a cold wave of fear. The Drakon fleet was moving fast, and it would reach the fortress by morning. He turned to his officers, who were standing around the room, their faces grim. "We need a new plan," he said, his voice firm but tired. "If we lose Ironclad, we lose everything." The officers looked at each other, but no one spoke. They had tried everything already. They had used every trick they knew, but nothing had worked. The Drakons always found a way to counter their moves. It was as if they were always one step ahead. Finally, one of the officers, a young alien named Riva, spoke up. "General, maybe we should send a distress signal. We need reinforcements. Maybe someone out there will hear us and come to help." General Zarin shook his head. "We've already sent signals. Many times. No one has answered. We are on our own." His words hung heavy in the air, and for a moment, no one said anything. It felt like hope was slipping away, like sand slipping through fingers. Outside the fortress, the soldiers were preparing for the worst. They checked their weapons and adjusted their armor. They knew the Drakons were coming, and they knew this might be their last fight. Some of them whispered prayers, while others stayed silent, their faces set with determination. They would fight until the end, even if it meant they would not see another sunrise. As the night grew darker, the sound of engines could be heard in the distance. It was the Drakon fleet, getting closer. The soldiers looked up at the sky, and their hearts sank. The Drakon ships were massive, shaped like black daggers cutting through the darkness. There were so many of them, and they moved with a silent, deadly grace. Inside Ironclad, General Zarin watched the enemy ships approach on the screen. He took a deep breath, trying to calm the storm inside him. "Prepare the defenses," he ordered. "We hold this fortress, no matter what." He knew it was a nearly impossible task, but he also knew they had no other choice. They had to fight, even if the odds were against them. As the first rays of dawn began to break, the Drakon fleet stopped just outside the range of the fortress's weapons. It was like they were teasing the Allies, letting them see the full power of their forces before the attack began. The Dracons were confident, and why wouldn't they be? They had won every battle so far. To them, this was just the final step. The Allied forces braced themselves, ready for the inevitable clash. They were outnumbered and outgunned, but they would not give up. This was their home, their planet, and they would protect it with everything they had left, even if it meant fighting to their last breath. The battle was about to begin, and it felt like the end. But somewhere deep inside, General Zarin still held on to a tiny spark of hope. Maybe, just maybe, something would change. Maybe a miracle would happen. But as he looked at the overwhelming enemy forces, he knew that it was just a dream. The final stand. The sky over Ironclad Fortress was a dark, heavy gray, almost like it knew what was about to happen. The air was tense, and every soldier in the fortress was preparing for the battle they knew would decide everything. It was still early in the morning, and the first light of dawn was just beginning to break. But there was no time to admire the sunrise. The Dracons were coming. General Zarin stood on the fortress wall, looking out at the horizon. From this high up, he could see the dark shapes of the Dracon ships in the distance. They were like shadows, slowly creeping closer. The sight sent a chill down his spine, but he did not let it show. He had to stay strong for his soldiers. They were depending on him. "General," said Riva, the young officer who had suggested sending a distress signal. She had been up all night, helping to prepare the defenses. "The troops are ready, but I don't know how long we can hold them off." General Zarin nodded, his face serious. "We hold them off as long as we can," he said. "We don't let them take this fortress. We fight, no matter what." His words were calm but firm, like a steel blade. The soldiers nearby heard him and straightened their backs, feeling a little stronger. Even though the situation was dire, their general's words gave them courage. Ironclad Fortress was built to be strong. It had thick walls made of heavy metal, tall watchtowers, and powerful weapons ready to fire. But the Dracons were not just any enemy. They had destroyed many fortresses before this one, and each time they had done it with ease. Everyone knew this would be a hard fight. The sun slowly rose, and soon the Dracon ships began to move. They did not rush. They moved slowly, almost lazily, as if they were sure they would win. The sight made the soldiers at Ironclad nervous, but they did not back down. They tightened their grips on their weapons and got into position, ready to fight. The Dracon fleet stopped just out of range of the fortress's weapons. It was almost as if they were mocking the Allies, daring them to attack first. But General Zarin was not going to fall for their tricks. He knew that the Dracons were waiting for the perfect moment to strike. They wanted the Allies to panic, to make a mistake. Inside the command center, the screens showed the Dracon ships hovering, waiting. The officers were tense, their eyes fixed on the displays. "They're stalling," said one of the officers. "They're trying to scare us." "Let them try," General Zarin said, his voice steady. "We won't give them what they want." He took a deep breath and then spoke louder, so everyone in the room could hear. "Listen to me. This is our last stand. If we fall, Zyra 9 falls. But I promise you this. We will make them pay for every inch they try to take. We will fight, and we will not go down quietly." The soldiers could hear his speech over the fortress's communication system. It wasn't a long speech, but it was enough. It gave them strength. They knew they were outnumbered, but they would not let fear control them. Then, without warning, the Dracons attacked. Hundreds of dark ships shot forward, their engines roaring like thunder. The sky filled with bright flashes of light as the Dracons began firing their weapons. Missiles and laser blasts streaked across the sky, heading straight for the fortress. Ironclad's defense systems roared to life. Huge cannons on the walls fired back, and bright shields flickered as they tried to block the incoming attacks. The sound was deafening, and the ground shook under the force of the explosions. The battle had begun. For a moment, it looked like the fortress could hold. The Dracon's first wave of attacks was powerful, but the fortress's shields held up. Cannons fired back, hitting several enemy ships and sending them crashing to the ground. The soldiers cheered, thinking they might have a chance. But the Dracons were not done. They sent in a second wave, even stronger than the first. More ships joined the fight, and this time they targeted the weak points of the fortress. The shields began to crack, and small explosions appeared along the walls. The Dracons knew exactly where to hit, and they hit hard. Inside the command center, alarms were blaring. "Shields are failing," shouted an officer. "We need to reinforce them, or they'll break through." General Zarin clenched his fists. "Divert power from the lower levels," he ordered. "Keep those shields up." He knew it was only a temporary solution, but they had to buy more time. Every second they held on was another second the Dracons had to spend fighting. Outside, the soldiers were doing their best to hold the line. They'd fired their weapons, trying to take down as many Dracon ships as they could. But the enemy just kept coming, wave after wave. The sky was filled with black shapes, and it felt like there was no end to them. As the battle raged on, General Zarin watched from the command room. He could see the damage to the fortress, and he knew they were losing. But he also saw his soldiers, fighting with everything they had. They were brave, even when things looked hopeless. And that gave him strength. "We won't let them win," he said quietly, more to himself than anyone else. "We will hold this fortress. We will make them regret ever coming here." But even as he said those words, he knew how difficult it would be. The Dracons were stronger, and they were closing in. The battle was fierce, and it felt like the end was near. But Ironclad had not fallen yet, and as long as it stood, there was still hope. The soldiers kept fighting, not because they thought they could win, but because they had to. This was their final stand, and they would make it count. A surprise entry. The battle was raging, and things were not looking good for the Allied forces. The Dracons kept pushing harder, sending more and more ships to attack Ironclad Fortress. The Allied soldiers were fighting with all their strength, but they were getting tired. It felt like the enemy was endless, and the fortress's defenses were breaking down. General Zarin stood in the command room, watching the screens. Every time a shield flickered or a cannon stopped firing, his heart sank a little more. He could see the damage spreading across the fortress, and he knew they couldn't hold out much longer. "Keep firing," he ordered. "Do not let them through." The officers followed his commands, but they could feel the same fear. The Dracons were too strong, and it was only a matter of time before they broke through. Everyone in the fortress knew what was coming, but they kept fighting. They had to. As the battle reached its peak, something strange happened. The Dracon ships suddenly stopped their advance. They hovered in place, as if they were waiting for something. The sky, which had been filled with explosions, grew quiet for a moment. The soldiers on the ground looked up, confused. What were the Dracons doing? "Why are they stopping?" Riva asked, looking at the main screen. "They had us. Why aren't they finishing the attack?" General Zarin didn't have an answer. He felt uneasy. The Dracons were known for their ruthless attacks. They never held back. This sudden pause made no sense. "Stay alert," he said. "It could be a trick. Prepare for another wave." But as the Allies braced themselves for what they thought was a new strategy, something unexpected happened. Out of the dark clouds above, new shapes appeared. At first, they looked like more Dracon ships, but as they got closer, it became clear they were different. Their designs were sleek, shiny, and nothing like the rough, sharp edges of the Dracon vessels. These new ships moved fast, cutting through the air like silver arrows. "General, we have unknown contacts approaching," said one of the officers, his voice filled with surprise. "They don't match any of our enemy profiles." General Zarin narrowed his eyes, trying to make sense of what he was seeing. "Are they allies?" he asked, but no one could answer. The Allied forces had sent out many calls for help, but no one had responded. Until now. As the new ships got closer, everyone in Ironclad could see them clearly. They were bigger than the Drakon ships, and they moved with a kind of grace and precision that was almost beautiful. Then, without any warning, the new ships opened fire, not on Ironclad, but on the Drakon fleet. Bright beams of light shot out from the mysterious ships, cutting through the dark enemy vessels. The Drakons didn't even have time to react. In seconds, many of their ships were blown apart, pieces scattering across the sky. The sudden attack threw the Drakon fleet into chaos. They tried to fight back, but the new ships were fast and precise. They moved like they knew exactly where to hit, and their weapons were far more powerful than anything the Drakons had seen before. The Allied soldiers stared, shocked. "Who are they?" Riva whispered. "Why are they helping us?" General Zarin didn't know. But whoever these new arrivals were, they were giving the Allies a chance. "Send a message," he ordered. "Thank them for the support, and ask for their identification." The communication officer quickly sent out the message, but there was no reply. The new ships didn't say anything. They just kept attacking the Drakons. It was like they had no time to talk. They were there to fight, and they were winning. The Drakon fleet tried to regroup, but it was no use. The new ships were too fast. They darted in and out, hitting their targets with perfect aim. It was clear they had advanced technology, much better than anything on the battlefield. One by one, the Drakon ships fell, and the sky began to clear. Inside Ironclad, the mood shifted from fear to hope. For the first time in a long while, the soldiers felt like they had a real chance. The Drakons were losing, and it was all thanks to these mysterious newcomers. "General, their ships are pushing the Drakons back," said an officer, almost in disbelief. "They're actually retreating." General Zarin allowed himself a small smile. "Then let's not waste this opportunity," he said. "Prepare to join the attack. We push forward and drive the Drakons out. This is our chance." The Allied forces quickly regrouped. With renewed energy, they joined the fight alongside their unexpected allies. Together, they pushed the Drakons back, forcing them to retreat further and further. It was a complete reversal. Just a few moments ago, Ironclad had been on the edge of defeat. Now, the Drakons were the ones running. As the battle began to die down, the new ships finally slowed and formed a protective line around Ironclad. They didn't fire anymore. They just hovered there, as if guarding the fortress. The Allied soldiers watched them, filled with gratitude but also curiosity. "General, they're sending us a signal," said the communication officer. "But it's not a message, it's just coordinates." "Coordinates," General Zarin repeated, puzzled. What could that mean? But before he could think more about it, the main screen showed something incredible. The new ships, as quickly as they had appeared, began to move away. They rose higher into the sky, then disappeared into the clouds, leaving behind only a calm, clear sky. Everyone was left in awe. Who were these strangers who had come out of nowhere to save them? And why had they helped without saying a word? General Zarin had many questions, but one thing was clear. Ironclad was still standing, and the battle was not over yet. For now, they had been given a chance to breathe, and they would not waste it. Whoever these mysterious allies were, they had turned the tide of the battle, and that was something to be thankful for. Powerful attack. The air was calm, but everyone inside Ironclad Fortress knew this was just a short break. The Drakons had been pushed back, but they were not defeated yet. General Zarin stood in the command room, still thinking about the mysterious ships that had helped them. Who were they? And why had they left without saying anything? But there was no time to think about that now. The Drakons would return, and this time, they would be even more dangerous. The general knew they had to act fast. They couldn't just wait for the enemy to attack again. They needed to strike first, and they needed to hit hard. "Listen up, everyone," General Zarin said, his voice strong and clear. "We have a chance now. thanks to those unknown ships. But the Dracons will come back, and we can't afford to wait for them. We're going to attack their main base. We hit them where it hurts, and we make sure they don't come back." The officers nodded, and the room buzzed with activity as everyone began preparing for the attack. The plan was risky, but it was their best shot. If they could destroy the Dracon command ship, they could weaken the entire enemy fleet. Without their leader, the Dracons would be in chaos. But the command ship was heavily guarded, and getting to it would not be easy. As the Allied forces prepared, Riva approached General Zarin. "General, are you sure about this?" she asked, her face serious. "Attacking their main ship, it's dangerous. What if we fail?" General Zarin looked at her, his expression calm but determined. "I know it's dangerous," he said, "but if we don't take this risk, we lose anyway. The Dracons will keep coming until they destroy everything. We have to do this. We have to end it." Riva nodded, understanding. She had seen the courage of her fellow soldiers, and she knew they would fight with everything they had. "Then let's make it count," she said, her voice firm. Soon, the Allied fleet was ready. The remaining ships gathered, forming a tight group around Ironclad. The soldiers on board checked their weapons, preparing themselves for the battle ahead. They knew this might be their last mission. But they were ready. They had come this far, and they would not give up now. The plan was simple but bold. The Allied ships would fly straight at the Dracon fleet, using speed and surprise to break through their defenses. While the Dracon ships were distracted, a smaller group would sneak behind them and attack the command ship. It was a risky move, but it was their best chance. The signal was given, and the Allied ships launched into the sky. Engines roared as they flew toward the enemy, the sun reflecting off their metal hulls. The soldiers inside held their breath, their hands gripping their controls tightly. They could see the dark shapes of the Dracon ships ahead, waiting for them. The Dracons had already started to regroup, and they were ready to fight back. The first wave of Allied ships hit the Dracon fleet with full force. Explosions lit up the sky as missiles and laser beams fired in all directions. The Dracons were caught off guard for a moment, surprised by the sudden attack. But they quickly adjusted, and soon the air was filled with the sounds of battle once again. General Zarin watched from Ironclad, his heart pounding. The Allied ships were giving everything they had, but he knew this was only the beginning. The real challenge was still ahead. "Send in the strike team," he ordered. "It's time." A small group of fast, agile ships broke away from the main battle. They flew low, using the smoke and chaos to hide their movements. Inside one of those ships was Riva, leading the strike team. Her eyes were focused, and her hands were steady on the controls. She could see the massive Dracon command ship ahead, dark and menacing. This was their target. "We're getting close," said one of the pilots, his voice crackling over the radio. "I can see their defense turrets." "Stay sharp," Riva replied. "We have to move fast. Hit them hard, and then get out." As the strike team approached the command ship, they could see it was surrounded by smaller Dracon vessels, acting like a shield. But the strike team was ready. They launched their first attack, firing missiles at the smaller ships. The explosions were bright and powerful, clearing a path straight to the command ship. "Now," shouted Riva, "go for the main ship." The strike team sped forward, aiming directly at the command ship. The Dracons realized what was happening and began to fire back, but the Allied ships were fast. They dodged and weaved, avoiding the enemy fire. Riva's ship led the charge, her eyes fixed on the target. She could feel the tension, but she didn't let it distract her. This was their moment. With a loud roar, the Allied ships unleashed their full firepower. Missiles and laser beams slammed into the command ship's hull, creating massive explosions. The ship shook, and small fires began to spread across its surface. For a moment, it looked like the Dracon ship would hold, but then there was a loud cracking noise. The side of the ship split open, and pieces of metal flew out into space. "We did it," shouted one of the pilots. "The command ship is damaged." But the fight wasn't over yet. The Dracons, realizing their command ship was in trouble, sent more ships to defend it. They swarmed around the strike team, trying to push them back. Reva's ship shook as it was hit, alarms blaring inside the cockpit. "Keep attacking," she yelled. "We can't stop now." The Allied ships continued their assault, targeting the weak spots on the command ship. Bit by bit, they broke through its defenses, tearing it apart. Inside Ironclad, General Zarin watched with hope. If the strike team could destroy the command ship, it would be a huge blow to the Dracons. It could turn the tide of the entire war. Finally, after what felt like hours of fighting, the command ship began to collapse. Flames burst out from inside, and it started to sink, losing control. The Dracon ships around it hesitated, unsure of what to do. Without their leader, they were lost. Reva's ship flew past the burning wreckage, her heart racing. "We did it," she whispered, almost in disbelief. "We actually did it." The Allied forces had struck a powerful blow, but the war was not over yet. The Dracons were still out there, and they would not give up easily. But for the first time, the Allies had shown they could fight back. They had proven that they could stand against the Dracons, and now they had a real chance to win. The turning point. The smoke cleared slowly, revealing the damage left behind by the fierce battle. The command ship of the Dracons was in ruins, drifting aimlessly in space, while the surrounding Dracon ships began to scatter. The Allied forces felt a rush of hope. They had struck a powerful blow against their enemy, and the tide was finally turning in their favor. General Zarin watched from the command room of Ironclad Fortress, his heart racing. He could see the chaos among the Dracon fleet on the screens. Ships were colliding, and the Dracons were in disarray. It was a moment he had longed for, and now that it was here, he could hardly believe it. "Sir, the Dracons are retreating," shouted one of the officers, pointing at the screen. "They're pulling back to regroup." Zarin's eyes widened. "This is our chance," he said. "We can't let them escape. We must follow them and push the attack." The officers jumped into action. Orders were given, and the Allied ships began to move forward, chasing the Dracon fleet. It was a risky decision, but Zarin knew they had to keep the pressure on. If they let the Dracons regroup, they could come back stronger than ever. Reva, still in her ship, felt the rush of victory. She had never thought they would make it this far. The strike team had done what no one expected, and now they were in pursuit of the enemy. "Let's stay sharp, team," she said over the comms. "We need to be careful. They might try to pull a fast one on us." The Allied ships flew through the debris of the battle, the remnants of destroyed Dracon vessels floating around them like broken toys. The atmosphere was tense, but the soldiers felt a new sense of purpose. They were no longer just defending. They were on the offensive. As they advanced, they spotted the retreating Dracon ships ahead. The Dracons were trying to escape to a nearby planet, but the Allies were determined to catch them. Zarin ordered the fleet to increase speed, and soon they were in hot pursuit. "Keep firing at their rear guard," he commanded. "We have to slow them down." Lasers and missiles streaked through space, striking the Dracon ships. The Allied forces worked together, coordinating their attacks and moving as one. It felt like a dance, with each ship knowing its role. The Dracon fleet was losing ships quickly, but they were still fighting back, trying to protect their escape. In the midst of the battle, Reva spotted something unusual. A large Dracon ship had separated from the main group and was heading toward a nearby planet. "General, one of their bigger ships is breaking away," she called out. "It looks like they're trying to regroup down there." Zarin frowned, realizing the Dracons might be planning to set up a new base on the planet. If they succeeded, it would give them a chance to rebuild and regroup. "We can't let them get away," he said urgently. "We need to split our forces. Reva, take a small team and follow that ship." The rest of us will keep pressing the attack against the main fleet." "Understood," Riva replied, her voice steady. "We'll catch them." The strike team quickly adjusted their course and followed the Drakon ship toward the planet. As they entered the atmosphere, they could see the surface below, a mix of rocky terrain and dark forests. The Drakon ship landed on a flat area, and Riva's team hovered nearby, preparing to launch a ground attack. "This is it," Riva said, glancing at her team. "We have to move quickly before they can set up defenses. Stick together and watch each other's backs." The team landed their ships a short distance away and began to advance on foot, their weapons ready. The air was thick with tension, and every sound made them jump. They moved through the trees, keeping low and quiet. The Drakons would be expecting them, and they needed to be careful. As they got closer to the Drakon ship, they saw the enemy soldiers moving about, trying to establish a perimeter. Riva signaled her team to hold back and observe. "They're busy setting up. We can take them by surprise," she whispered. With a quick nod from her team, they charged forward, weapons blazing. The Drakons were taken by surprise, and the first wave of attacks caught them off guard. Explosions lit up the night sky as Riva and her team fought fiercely. It was a chaotic, fast-paced battle, but they were determined to push the Drakons back. Meanwhile, back in space, General Zarin and the rest of the Allied fleet continued to engage the remaining Drakon ships. The tide of battle had shifted dramatically. The Drakons were beginning to falter, their coordination breaking down. The Allied forces were relentless, refusing to give any quarter. Zarin felt a surge of hope as he watched the screens. "Keep pressing the attack. We're almost there," he urged his officers. Back on the planet, Riva and her team fought valiantly. They pushed deeper into the Drakon camp, causing chaos and confusion. The Drakon soldiers were trying to regroup, but the surprise attack had thrown them into disarray. Riva could see the fear in their eyes as they realized they were being outmatched. With every blast and every enemy soldier that fell, the Allies felt the weight of their victory. The turning point was happening before their eyes. They were no longer on the defensive. They were in control. "Push forward," Riva shouted, rallying her team. "We can't stop now. Let's finish this." As they advanced, the Drakons began to retreat, realizing they couldn't hold their position. The Allied forces were winning, and the Drakons were losing hope. It was a moment of triumph, and everyone could feel it. The turning point had come, and the battle was turning in favor of the Allies. They would not give up until the last Drakon was defeated. It was a fight for their future, and they would win. The strong push. The battle raged on, and the atmosphere was charged with energy. Riva and her team pushed deeper into the Drakon camp, their determination fueling every step. They could see the enemy soldiers scrambling to organize themselves, but fear filled the air. The Allies had taken them by surprise, and they were not ready for this fierce assault. Riva took a deep breath, her heart racing as she led her team. "Stay focused," she said. "We need to secure this area and make sure the Drakons can't regroup." The team nodded, their expressions set with resolve. They had come too far to turn back now. As they advanced, they found a group of Drakon soldiers trying to form a defensive line. Without hesitation, Riva raised her weapon and fired. The blast hit a Drakon soldier squarely in the chest, and he fell to the ground. The rest of her team quickly followed suit, laying down cover fire. The Drakons were caught off guard, and the Allied soldiers pressed their advantage. "Keep moving," Riva shouted as they pushed forward. The Allied soldiers fought with everything they had. The adrenaline surged through them, making them feel powerful. Every shot fired felt like a step closer to victory. On the other side of the battlefield, General Zarin watched the fight unfold from his command room. The screens showed the chaos and destruction that was happening on the planet below. He felt a mix of pride and fear. His forces were winning, but he knew the Drakons would not give up easily. "Sir, we're receiving reports from the ground team. an officer said, breaking Zaren's focus. "They're pushing into the Drakon camp and have caused significant damage. The enemy is struggling to hold their position." Zaren nodded, feeling a surge of hope. "Good. Keep the pressure on the remaining ships in space. We can't let them regroup." Back on the planet, Riva and her team reached the center of the Drakon camp. They spotted the massive Drakon command ship, still smoldering from their earlier attack. It was a symbol of their victory, but it was also a target. The Drakons were trying to protect it, knowing it was their last hope. "Let's hit that command ship," Riva yelled, pointing ahead. "We need to destroy it completely." The team moved toward the command ship, dodging blasts from Drakon soldiers. The enemy was desperate now, firing wildly as they tried to defend their last stronghold. Riva could see their fear, but she knew they had to stay focused. They were so close to victory. As they neared the command ship, a large group of Drakons appeared, blocking their path. They were angry and desperate, ready to fight to the last breath. "We have to get through them," Riva shouted. "This is our moment." The Allied soldiers formed a line, weapons raised. They exchanged fire with the Drakon soldiers, each side fighting fiercely. The sound of blaster fire echoed through the air, and the ground shook with the force of the battle. Riva felt the heat of the moment. It was like a storm, wild and chaotic. "Flank them," Riva ordered. "We need to split their attention." With her command, the team moved quickly to the sides, trying to catch the Drakons off guard. They charged forward, surprising the enemy and pushing them back. The Allied soldiers fought with everything they had, determination shining in their eyes. One of Riva's teammates, a young soldier named Aiden, fought bravely at her side. He had been nervous at first, but now he was full of confidence. "I'm with you, Riva," he shouted, firing his weapon with precision. His face was determined, and Riva felt a sense of pride. They were a team, and they were winning together. As they fought, the Drakons began to falter. Their lines broke, and they started to retreat. Riva saw an opening and took it. "Now, let's go for the command ship," she yelled. The team charged forward, pushing through the remaining Drakon soldiers. The command ship loomed large before them, still damaged but far from destroyed. Riva knew they had to finish this. "Aim for the weak spots," she called out. "We can end this here." The team moved to the side of the command ship, finding a hatch that led inside. Riva led the way, her heart pounding. They entered the dark interior, weapons raised, ready for anything. The air was tense, filled with the smell of smoke and burnt metal. Inside, they found a control room filled with Drakon soldiers trying to make sense of the chaos outside. "Get ready," Riva shouted, and the team opened fire. The Drakons were caught off guard once more, and the Allies surged forward. The fighting was fierce, but the Allies had the upper hand. They pushed the Drakons back, reclaiming the command room. Riva felt a rush of victory as she stood at the center of the room. They had done it, but there was no time to celebrate. "Plant the explosives," she ordered, urgency in her voice. "We have to destroy this ship." The team quickly set to work, placing explosives around the command room. As they finished, a loud alarm rang out, echoing through the halls. The Drakons outside were regrouping, realizing the threat they faced. "Let's go. We need to get out of here," Riva shouted, leading her team back toward the exit. The situation was growing desperate, but they had achieved so much. They had pushed back the Drakons and were about to deal a fatal blow. As they ran, the explosions they had set began to count down. The Drakons were in chaos, and the Allies felt the thrill of victory. They had taken a strong push against the enemy, and they were not going to stop now. With their hearts pounding, Riva and her team dashed outside, narrowly escaping as the command ship erupted in a massive explosion behind them. Flames shot into the sky, and the ground shook beneath their feet. They had done it. They had struck a powerful blow against the Drakons. The mysterious victory. The explosion echoed across the landscape as the Drakon command ship erupted in flames. Riva and her team watched from a safe distance, their hearts pounding with a mix of fear and triumph. The smoke billowed into the sky, marking a decisive end to the battle. They had won, but a strange feeling lingered in the air, as if something was not quite right. "Did we really do it?" Aiden asked, his voice filled with awe. He looked around at his fellow soldiers, who were also processing the victory. The cheers of the Allied forces could be heard in the distance, but a sense of unease washed over Riva. "Yes, we did," she replied, trying to sound confident. "But we need to stay alert. This isn't over until we confirm the Drakons are completely defeated." The team regrouped with the other Allied soldiers, who were celebrating their hard-fought victory. They shared high fives and hugs, relieved to have survived the intense battle. General Zarin approached Riva, a proud smile on his face. "Excellent work, Riva," he said, clapping her on the shoulder. "You and your team showed incredible bravery today. We could not have done it without you." "Thank you, sir," Riva replied, feeling a sense of pride swell within her. "But I can't shake the feeling that something's off." Zarin raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" "Look around," she said, glancing at the sky. "The Drakons are retreating, but they didn't fight like they usually do. It's as if they were already beaten before we attacked." Zarin considered her words, nodding slowly. "You may be right. We should investigate further. We need to understand what happened here." The Allied forces began to gather, discussing their next steps. Some were eager to chase down any remaining Drakon ships, while others wanted to assess the damage done to the planet. Riva felt a deep urge to learn more about the Drakons and their sudden retreat. It was too strange. As they moved toward the wreckage of the command ship, the atmosphere changed. The cheering died down, and a heavy silence fell over the group. Riva led her team forward, determined to uncover the truth. "Stay close," she whispered, her instincts on high alert. The air felt charged, as if something was watching them. They approached the smoldering remains of the ship, the wreckage scattered across the rocky ground. "Look at this," Aiden said, pointing to a strange device half buried in the dirt. It was unlike anything they had seen before, a metal box with glowing symbols etched into its surface. "What do you think it is?" Riva knelt beside it, her heart racing. "I don't know, but it could be important. We should call for the engineers to take a look." Before they could move, the device emitted a low hum. The ground trembled slightly, and the glowing symbols began to pulse. The team jumped back, startled. "What is happening?" one soldier exclaimed, his eyes wide with fear. "I don't know," Riva shouted, but she couldn't look away. The device seemed to be reacting to their presence, as if it had come alive. The hum grew louder, and suddenly, a bright light burst forth from the device, blinding them all. When the light faded, the team found themselves in a different place. They stood in a vast room filled with advanced technology, the walls shimmering with energy. They were no longer in the wreckage of the command ship, but in what looked like a Drakon base. "Where are we?" Aiden whispered, fear in his voice. The room was empty, but the air buzzed with energy. Riva scanned their surroundings, trying to make sense of it all. "I think we've entered a Drakon command center," she said, her voice steady despite the uncertainty. "We need to find a way out." As they moved cautiously through the unfamiliar space, they noticed strange screens displaying images of the battle. It showed the Drakon ships in chaos, but there was something unusual about it. The screens revealed communication between Drakon leaders, discussing plans for a retreat before the Allied forces even arrived. "This doesn't make sense," Riva said, piecing it together. "They knew we were coming. It's like they were preparing to abandon ship." Suddenly, a voice echoed through the room. "Intruders detected. Initiating lockdown." Riva's heart raced as alarms blared. "We have to hurry," she shouted, leading her team down a narrow corridor. They needed to find an exit before they were trapped. As they ran, Riva thought about the implications of what they had discovered. The Dracons had not just lost. They had chosen to retreat. What could force them to abandon their plans? They reached a large door marked Exit, and Riva pushed against it. To her surprise, it slid open, revealing a vast hangar filled with Dracon ships. But there was something different about these ships. They were unlike any they had seen before, sleeker, more advanced, and clearly designed for speed. "Look at those ships," Aiden exclaimed. "They're amazing. But why are they here?" Riva wondered aloud. It's like they were waiting for something. Just then, the alarm stopped, and the room fell silent. A holographic image flickered to life in front of them. It was a Dracon leader, his face stern and commanding. "You have found our secret base," he said, his voice echoing. "But you are too late. The war is over, and we have chosen a different path." "What do you mean?" Riva asked, her confusion growing. "The Dracon Empire has seen the futility of this conflict," the leader continued. "We seek peace, not more bloodshed. Your victory was unexpected, but it has shown us the strength of humanity." Riva's heart raced. Was this a trick? "How can we trust you?" she challenged. "You don't have to," the Dracon leader replied calmly. "But I invite you to explore this base and learn our true intentions. The choice is yours." Riva exchanged glances with her team. This was a moment of uncertainty, but also a chance for something new, a chance for peace. As they stood in the hangar, surrounded by the remains of a war and the possibility of a new beginning, Riva felt a spark of hope. Their victory had been mysterious, but perhaps it was the start of something greater. They had fought hard, and now they had the opportunity to change the future. "Let's see what they have to offer," Riva said finally, her voice filled with determination. They stepped forward, ready to explore the unknown.